unusual icon. So as you can see, there are a whole variety of ways that you can go about this. There are some standard conventions and business rules that you want to follow. Again, using white space, using consistent conventions, making sure that you're using some kind of a bold color and treatment visually that stands out, and making sure that the wording of the call to action is very clear so the user knows exactly what to expect. Users tend not to like surprises when they do usability studies. They find that surprise or having a button take you somewhere where you weren't planning to go makes people very anxious. As a result of being anxious, they don't absorb information and their abandonment rate skyrockets. So they tend to leave a site where they feel uncomfortable. So done clearly and done well, a call to action on a site is your best friend. It's one of the most powerful tools you can use. You know, your site content is certainly a draw. The design of a site is engaging. All those things are terrific and they're important elements. Usability, people being able to find what they need. But there's a presumption that there are things that you want them to do besides just getting information and looking at your cool design and finding their way around the site. You have a vested interest in them taking certain actions, so it certainly is worth your while to make sure that your calls to action are done well and done in a way that will pan out for you in terms of conversions.
So thank you very much to Pete. We're going to open it up to questions right now, and to sort of jumpstart that process, I actually have a question for Pete, if that's okay with you. So say I am in communications working for a higher ed institution, and I know you talked about really taking a look at your analytics, but what really is the starting point? Because obviously it's evident that calls to action are going to help me with my website at this institution. So what would really be the process, sort of a step-by-step process, to really look and see which would be the most effective?
That's a good question, and it wasn't even a plant. That was a real question. So I always recommend to my clients, I'm a strategist, so by nature I have 100,000 different suggestions and thoughts on how to do things. But I do tend to recommend to my clients who don't already have an advanced knowledge of Google Analytics or what have you, who have no context for this and who may be doing it for the first time. Or considering doing it well for the first time. I always recommend start simply. If there are a few things that you know that you want your primary site users to do, then put those as call to action on the site, and rather than have lots of calls to action, do fewer and see how they work. And I think there are some choices, for example, for higher ed that are probably fairly obvious. I would say apply online is by far the most important. Again, it depends on the school and what the school's recruitment goals are, but that tends to be the number one. And then I think by school it differs. So I would think carefully about where you get your best students. Do you get them from on-campus admissions events? Do you get them from traveling roadshow events? Do you get them from online inquiries where people fill out a form and say, I'm interested, could you send me more information? So I would pick my top 3, and I would make those calls to action prominent on every page of the site that makes sense in terms of that audience. Again, you wouldn't want to put apply online in an alumni section, but for the rest of the site, I would make those clear.
Okay, it looks like we might have another question from someone.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, we might be having an audio issue there, so apologies. But if you want to type in your question to us, we would be more than happy to respond. I'd like to also note that we are continuing the conversation on Twitter, hashtag iFactoryChat. So we'll be continuing that through the week. If you have any further questions or want to continue the discussion around calls to action, that is where you can find us.
And I am going to answer a question from Karen that she actually typed, which was good of her because I'm having trouble hearing. So higher ed examples, and that's a great question, Karen. I was actually looking before. Surprise, surprise, there aren't a lot of them out there that I think do a really, really good job of calls to action. In my experience, a lot of higher ed sites run into the issue of lots of vested interest by lots of people, particularly faculty, who feel that if they are on the home page, it somehow speaks to the fact that they are important, that their research is important. And I think sometimes what happens is the focus of the site gets lost, so that while prospective students may find that interesting, ultimately it's not enough to have them be looking at various kinds of research going on in the institution. That's all great, but it's only great in the context of luring them to the school. So let me give you an example that I think is actually fairly good. Cornell Johnson. So this is Cornell University's Johnson School of Management. And I love this site in the sense that it has very little actual information on the home page. It doesn't overwhelm you with information about the school. It gives you a quick blurb about what's going on at the school, and it's kind of a quick brand message. Then you'll notice that right below is admissions events. I happen to know that's because for Cornell Johnson, the main draw for their application pool is from admissions events. So if they can get people to come to an admissions event, they know there is a very high statistical likelihood that they will actually apply to the school. Once they apply, then it's a matter of luring them in terms of, some of these students are getting into other schools as well, and there's a competition for the best students. But what's really clear is that this is a call to action, and then there are 4 calls to action that are actually, I also happen to know, in priority order. So there's Tell Me More. This is to prove the case that for students who may fit the profile of Cornell, this is actually the argument that convinces them. Again, this is about a good fit. Maximize your maximize your ROI. Talks about direct benefit, which in today's economy is hugely important for business schools. And then Take the Next Step. Again, using the convention of the lower right, Take the Next Step is all about attending an admissions event, completing a pre-assessment, which is something a little unusual this school does. It's a call to action that lets them gauge early interest in a school without making a student go through the full application process, or apply now. So I think this is an example of a site that focuses almost the majority of its homepage on some kind of call to action without diluting it by having lots of other information on the page. It's a fairly minimal design, which I think in this case is really effective. Did that answer your question, Karen? You can type.
So thank you to all of you for joining us today. As I mentioned, you can follow us on Twitter at iFactoryBoston and on LinkedIn and Facebook as well. And we will be in contact with a recording of this webinar and hope that you'll join us for future webinars. So thank you so much, and thank you, Pete.
Thank you, Lori, and thanks, folks, for coming. Appreciate it.